our emergency management response has become a big part of our mission about how we're going to respond to this, because as Dr. Beverly said before, we kind of think it's when and not if, when something like this is going to happen. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of background of why the rationale or why we think we're going to respond this way. But honestly, a lot of these diseases haven't been in the United States for, decades. And so we're going to kind of play this, but this is how we think we're going to start this response out anyway. So to give you a little bit of background of why we think we're going to do it and why the rationale for having some sort of a response is the fact that we are one of the most nation as far as in shipments of cattle. You can see that we stand number 2. This is over the last 5 years. This doesn't include the 5 to 6 million head of slaughter cattle that we import into our state on a yearly basis as well. So it's been said, and I haven't done the calculations, but it's been said that 25% of the value of the beef industry is in them 2 states right there as far as the number of cattle out there. And so we do see it as being fairly impactful. We see this, we know that cattle move in from everywhere, and on a yearly basis we'll import between, not counting the slaughter cattle, between 4 and 4.5 million head of cattle. And honestly, that's about 80,000 head on any road at any one time coming into the state of Kansas. So we know that our risk is higher. Our risk is we assume our risk is higher for some of these diseases coming into the state and involving us. I borrowed this from the Colorado folks in Colorado, our counterparts there, and I just wanted to show it to you just as a simulation of what happens is that each one of these lines indicates a movement that went into the National Western Stock Show for a 21-day period in 2016. As you can see, our risk and our susceptibility is fairly high. This didn't count the trips going back. So all the animals that went to the stock show had to go somewhere after the show. And so this is strictly movements that went from into the Denver Stock Show. That didn't account also the day-to-day movement that's happening to our local sale barns, to our local feedlots, or whatever the case may be. So the movement aspect of this is highly going to influence what we try to do. We know that the value of our livestock and marketing opportunities is there, and so we have to try to preserve that somehow. We talked about the feeding and breeding in shipments, the diversity of our livestock industries. We rank in the top 15 of all major livestock species: sheep, goats, dairy, cattle, horses, swine. So as far as population, we're in the top 15 of any one of those states. Several of these were in the top 3 to top 5, so it is impactful. And then obviously the size and density of our operations is going to change how we've done things or how we've thought about things here in the past. This is just a picture depicting our licensed cattle feedlots that we have in the state of Kansas. Doesn't include anything under 1,000 head, doesn't include swine operations, doesn't include dairies, doesn't include equine, doesn't include any of the cow-calf or the backgrounders out there that are not over 1,000 head. So you can see our density is huge in respect to Kansas. And obviously with that, all that being said, we know we can't operate like this. This isn't going to be possible, particularly if we get it in a large scale deal. Now, granted, we're going to probably end up hopefully a little prettier than this, but we're going to be doing some of this no matter what the case may be. But on a large scale basis, we're not going to be able to euthanize and dispose of these animals as a whole gamut operation. And the other thing I would like to point, and we pointed out, if you notice how many people up there, there's 20 to 25 people standing around that hole, just that hole itself. I've got 7 veterinarians in my division, and that's all we have. And so as Dr. Burton said, the people impact, the number of folks that we're going to have to deal with one of these diseases is going to be insurmountable, and so we're going to have to figure out a different way of doing this. So what are we going to do if disease outbreak in North America? What are we going to do now? I assume there's going to be a lot of this going on, myself included, but at the same time, we are going to have to respond. So one of the things that we have established here in the state of Kansas is a stop movement. And honestly, folks, we've decided and come to the conclusion that if we get a foreign animal disease, and I shouldn't say foreign animal disease, most of this has been related to foot and mouth disease. Most of our response is based on foot and mouth disease because we figure if we could respond to that, we can respond about anything. So I won't tell you there's going to be a stop movement for every disease that's out there, but mainly the big ones, the foot and mouth disease, the African swine fevers, classical swine fevers, we're going to implement a stop movement. And what that amounts to is at the point that there's a case of that identified anywhere in North America, the state of Kansas is going to issue a stop movement. There will be an order put out that says, hey, anything that's on the road, get to where you're going. But nothing starts at that point in time. Depending on where that first case is, it's kind of going to depend on how long that time frame is. We're going to shut down and say in 12 hours, we're going to say be where you're going to be or don't start. And at that point in time, in 12 hours, there'll be no more movement allowed, intrastate or interstate. So what that happens is that once we initiate that stop movement, we have pre-designed traffic control points designated. We've got MOUs with all of our neighboring states. What it amounts to is that once one state initiates a stop movement, all of the other 4 states have agreed to do so as well. We've elected to maintain or put these traffic control points on the 72 major inputs coming in and out of the state of Kansas. And so it's not that we're going to have a traffic control point in Kansas on every one of them roads, but we're going to share them. So Nebraska has this one, we have this one, and that type of thing. Our goal is to document what's moving. Yeah. Where did you come from? What do you haul at, and where are you going? And we're going to have that collected. If you happen to come from an area that disease happened to be in or went through that area, we have diversion points identified for each one of them points. We're going to divert you over, and we're going to do a better screening of those animals. But otherwise, it's just a matter of gathering data, gathering information so that if we have to respond later, we can to those animals. So it's getting to where you're at, get offloaded, and stop, stand down. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. This is just some examples. We have exercised this on a couple different occasions. We've actually got when I say we instigated, it isn't us that's going to do it. It's going to be our Kansas Department of Transportation and our Highway Patrol. We've got a great working relationship with those folks, and they've all agreed that they're on board. They man the post, they collect the data for us, they send it in, and then we go from there. The other thing, and most of these things I'm talking about are going to happen simultaneously. It's not that they're going to go from here to here type of deal. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to activate our emergency management team. We have a team that's involved with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Most of our folks that are in the agency, every division within our agency has people that are on this team. And it's been said that once this happens, it's all hands on deck, is what it amounts to. So we'll call those folks in. Basically, we are in the process of continually training them and giving them exercise and practice potential. If you haven't heard, state of Kansas, we have a large major exercise every year, and we will continue to have a large major exercise every year until Secretary McClaskey says otherwise. And that won't happen. She's on board with this thing. And so we've practiced this. If you ever come up and want to come up and see something that's kind of a neat mechanism going on, Kansas Department of Ag is 3 days in December. We don't do anything but this. And it's people take it serious. You wouldn't know any different other than if somebody says, every time we turn around, we have to say this is an exercise. But if we didn't say that, you wouldn't know that it was any different than the actual response. And so we do have a team, and we're always building that. The other thing we're going to do is do some data mining. And we have data within our agency, and a lot of that is what you folks out there in the field give us. It's our certificates of veterinary inspection. It's our captive vaccination charts. It's your TB testing charts and everything like that. So we have data. We've got our livestock market reports and stuff. And so once that disease hits, we're going to go back through that data and start looking at animal movement and animal sources that may have moved from that area. I'm glad to say now that we are current with our CVI data input. And when I say that is before it's always been a pile of papers about this high. And so if we ever had to need to go back and look at something, we had to dig through the pile of papers. Right now we have them in a searchable database. We are 100% caught up on our imports. We don't have our exports in there, but we are on our imports. It's been a major task, and a lot of that has been due to a lot of you folks engaging and getting on board with our electronic certificates, because that allows us to be much more efficient and do whatever. But when when this happens, this is where it's going to pay off, is what it amounts to. So I hear it, and I was a practitioner, and I knew myself, you know, why do we do these papers? Nobody looks at them. I'll tell you, we do look at them. And we didn't used to, but we do. And so they do mean something. They may not mean something that day at the show, but they do mean something to us in the long run. And we've used them many, many times with the TV traces we've been doing and stuff of that sort. So they are important. The other thing we do, and we will instigate our increased surveillance. And I want to throw this up here as more as a reminder to you. Foreign animal disease investigations are happening every day across the nation. There's foreign animal disease diagnosticians, folks, veterinarians like yourself that have gone and got additional training. We have every one of the veterinarians in our division is foreign animal disease diagnosticians. A lot of our USDA veterinary services counterparts and our import-export folks are diagnosticians as well. And so these are folks that have got special training to identify some of these diseases and know the processes that it takes to do the sample collection and how to get them to where they need to be and develop a priority and to start this investigation. So they're happening every day. As you can see here in 15 and 16, we did 24, 25, 26 of them every year. A lot of that increase is due to Seneca Valley virus as well as AI. We're getting a lot more calls as far as high mortalities or blisters or whatever the case may be. So we do them each and every day. But we will ramp this up. I mean, we'll honestly start looking at that a little harder as we start to get into these diseases if they're out there. So if you've been to any one of our presentations, you've seen this picture before, but this is the kind of the depiction of what's going to happen if we have a positive premise here in the state of Kansas. We will develop a premise, an infected premise, which is the little white dot in the center. There will be basically an infected zone built around that. And then the blue is a buffer zone. And that's, them three things are going to be consistent to what we can call the control zone. So if it's an isolated premise, honestly, and in the case of, say, foot and mouth disease, that buffer zone is where we're going to go in and identify all the susceptible species in there, and we're going to try to identify them and euthanize and dispose of those animals. Get that source of infection out of it. Get that ability to have that disease spread. And that's saying it's a isolated source. And then we will have a surveillance zone around that, which is the white, where we'll continue to do surveillance every 48 hours and that type of thing. And that's where we're going to ask your folks, your guys' help. Now, do I expect you to go out and knock on every door? No, really, we don't want that. But be in contact with your clientele. Let them know what we're seeing. Let them know what they need to be looking for. And let's start that enhanced surveillance as we need to see fit. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. But what happens here if we get a foot and mouth disease in a feedlot, the Panhandle of Texas? There's a really good chance that we will see that control zone be that red circle, that we will expand it. It has to be a minimum of 10K or 10 kilometers, which is about 6.2 miles. But we can make it as big as we need to make it. And so there's a really good chance if we get something in that area that we can't depict that feedlot across the section is not susceptible, that he hasn't been exposed, that the dairy across the street hasn't been exposed. And so the density of premises in that area is so huge that we're going to expand that out. Does that mean, and that brings to the second point, we can't euthanize and dispose all those animals. There's no physical way that we can. And so even if we wanted to. And so that's where we're going to go into a lot of our new concepts as far as enhanced surveillance, enhanced passive surveillance, and start looking at things a little higher. We're trying to instigate extra biosecurity protocols. And so Dr. Burton alluded to that, and a lot of it segues right into what we're going to try to do and what we're doing now to try to instigate them plans and that planning that's going on. So the potential types of FMD outbreak is you can see it. I mean, our response to a type 1, a focal, a cow herd that might have happened in Kansas or a cow herd that might have happened in Nevada. If it's a single source, our response is going to be a lot greater than if we get it into a sale barn or one of our large livestock markets, ends up being a type 3 or type 4. that response is going to be greatly enhanced. It's different from what we're going to do. But the ultimate goal is that we are going to try to prevent the spread of that disease. And this one right here is, in a nutshell, our goal is as animal health officials, we're going to try to prevent the spread. We're going to go out and try to detect it, find it, do the movement restrictions, do the euthanasia, disposal if it needs to happen. We're going to try to prevent the spread. But honestly, preventing the exposure, or from your individual operations or your individual client's operations, is going to be up to them. They're going to have to take the steps necessary and going to have to know what it takes necessary to do that. And so that's where this educational component comes on. And it doesn't need to be a whole hog change of what we're going to do, what they do in their operation. It's just knowing what steps they can take. So the big thing out there right now, or the buzzword, is continuity of business. And in no way do we want to kill this industry trying to save it. And so we've got to figure out ways that these operations can continue, operations that are not affected. We've got to figure out a way that they can move. And obviously, I throw the two pictures up there. Them are our two commodities that probably come to mind as the most pressing. We've got to figure out a way how we're going to move milk. We've got to figure out a way that we can move pigs. Do we have that figured out? No, we don't. We're getting there. We're getting closer, and we know that it's an issue. But the pig thing is going to be our big Achilles heel. The fact of how are we going to move live animals that are susceptible to a foot and mouth disease outbreak? How are we going to move them through cattle country? How are we going to move them across by that large dairy? So we've got a lot more work to do, but there's been a lot of thoughts and a lot of effort put towards it, and we're far better off than we were even 6 months ago as far as figuring it out. But we want to make sure that we have the ability to move these products as soon as we can mitigate the risk or have a risk assessment. So what that's going to amount to is it's going to become a permitted type movement. So that, and a lot of that was demonstrated in the HPAI outbreaks that they had in Minnesota and Iowa. Anytime they wanted to move a chicken, an egg product, an egg carton, they had to call and get a permit. They had to call or develop a permit to say, hey, this is what I'm moving, this is the steps I took to make sure that I'm not a problem, and this is where I'm going. And then that had to go to the receiving state and say, are you willing to accept it? So every time one of those happened, that process had to go. The issue is doing it at the speed of commerce. When they're moving out 15 loads of cracked eggs or liquid eggs that day, how do you do that fast? How do you make that process happen? So, and it's going to be the same thing with our moving our milk or moving our pigs, is that we're going to have to develop a system that can operate at the speed of commerce. So we have a system in place. It's not foolproof yet, but it's getting there. But anyway, what can happen is operations will apply for a permit. Just what I said, they're going to have to dictate or disclose all that information they have. The biggest part of it is what are you doing on your farm to protect yourself from being infected? That's the key point of whether we're going to allow that product to move. So no approval is guaranteed. It's going to be based on risk. What have you done for biosecurity protocols in the past, and what have you done to enhance your biosecurity protocols on your operation to make sure that you're still safe? And then it's also going to be based on necessity of movement. 2 days after we break with foot and mouth disease, and you call me and say, I got a set of steers that need to go to slaughter, we're probably not going to say that's okay. We're probably going to say, hey, hang on to them for a little bit, and we'll figure out something. But at the same time, if you tell me I got 15 loads of milk sitting in my parking lot, we got to figure out a way to get them somewhere. And so that's the process that we're working through right now. They're constantly going to be evaluated as we start getting more of this information in, as we talk about this data mining. Once we get movements, did that county become susceptible because we know that there was a positive case moved or a potential case moved out of that positive farm? We're going to reevaluate the movements and what needs to happen in that respect. And honestly, this is going to last months, if not, a couple years in that respect, until we become free again. That aspect of lasting months. There's still one county, I think in Iowa, that still requires permitting because of the HPAI. They still, everything that moves out of that county in Iowa has to be permitted out of it. I'm not sure I know why. I mean, basically considered ourselves free of it, but there's something about that county that there's still a lot of folks require them to be permitted out. So this is kind of where this is from. And we talked about biosecurity plans, and Dr. Sanderson's going to go into it a lot greater detail here in just a little bit. But the Secure Food Supply Plans is an initiative that's paid for by the USDA folks in an effort to develop a protocol for product movement, a protocol for biosecurity. So it was really, there is one that's I don't have it up there, but a secure poultry supply. Invokes secure turkeys, secure broilers and stuff. And so it was put into practice 2 years ago in 2015. Found a lot of problems with it. They've changed a lot of those problems. They've addressed some things. But the goal is to develop a set of plans that are somewhat related in the fact that if you have a pig farm, you can be assured that if I'm doing the secure beef supply, that I'm doing what I need to do as much as I can to protect my industry as well as my pig farm. And so the idea is to make a cross-reference across that. And it's a development for states, for myself, and the regulatory component of it, or the response component to say, hey, if you're following the steps in the secure milk supply, I know you're doing everything that's been vetted out there, and I'm comfortable allowing that milk to come into my farm. If you're not, then we have to reevaluate everything that you're doing if you're not following everything. And so it kind of gives us a template or a recipe a little bit, and I hate to say recipe because everyone's going to be different, but it gives us an opportunity to evaluate whether they're doing the things they need to do. And they are well thought out, they're proven, their techniques out there. And so like I said, Dr. Sanderson is going to go into it a little more in detail here shortly. So they are there, we're buying into those, and we're constantly, and every one of them is considered a draft, and so we're constantly reevaluating whether they're applicable and how they need to be changed. I've basically said a lot of this. Like I said, it provides a baseline for me to say, as a feedlot, did you do the things you need to be doing to allow your cattle to come into my state to be slaughtered? So that you're not exposing my operations to undue risk. And then the other thing I wanted to bring out, and this is another part of our response, and we mentioned it earlier, and Dr. Burton brought it out in great detail, is the huge manpower issue that we're going to be dealing with, that we're going to have, the response capabilities that we need to have in an effort to respond to one of these types of diseases is huge. Like I said, I've got 7 veterinarians in my division. USDA, I think all told, we got 10 or 15 as far as regulatory. We can't do that. And so this is a concept that we're kicking off here. It kind of piggybacks on the veterinary response corps that used to be, that some of you folks may have been involved in. This is kind of a reinvigoration of it. And I introduced Dr. David Hogg over here. David is our Assistant Emergency Management Coordinator. So David's charge is to kick this off. And in fact, this is kind of, you're the first ones to see this. We've been working on it, but we are kicking this out there as a response for. Basically what it amounts to is we're going to go out to the communities and call upon your experts, call upon your folks as far as, we know that we're going to need animal handlers and cattle vaccinators and pig handlers and all that kind of stuff, but we're also going to need lots of other things. We're going to need truck drivers. We're going to need human medical folks. We're going to need lots of assistance in lots of different areas, appraisers, accountants, bookkeepers, data people. So this is kind of an effort to build that infrastructure out there. We talk about what volunteers can do for us, but also what we're going to do for those volunteers. We know that we can't just sign you up and say, all right, we'll call you someday when we need you. We've got to provide you some support. And so that's what David's job is, that's what his charge is, and his challenge is to build that. We also, I think we've got 30, 40 specific, 23 different job titles that we perceive that we're going to need help with. And so, like I said, if your folks are interested, if you've got folks at home that are interested, staff, there's going to be lots of businesses at the initial impact of it that are not going to be able to do business as usual. So can we use some of that expertise that you guys have on hand? And so that's what this opportunity is. So with that, go to our website, grab David, grab myself. We want to visit about this, and like I said, David's going to hit the road here in the next few weeks, and we're really going to start to try to kick this off and see if we can't get some interest in developing some sort of a response for it. And not just animal diseases. I mean, we used a lot of volunteers in the fires in Southwest. We used a lot of volunteers in the snowstorms in the Southwest. And so a lot of natural disaster issues, this is where we want to be involved in that respect. And different ones call different ones, but like I said, the disease response is probably our granddaddy that we're going to be calling on folks for. So I put this up here. If we get it, folks, it's gonna hurt. I mean, there's no way around it, and it's not going to be very comfortable. But at the same time, I think we have a way, at least a roadmap, to say that we can make it as painful as less painful as we can. It's not going to be business as usual. We're going to have to change our practices. We're going to have to do different things differently. But the more we can plan and the more we can gauge it up front, I think we can help alleviate some of that pain. And so, like I said, if you have interest, if you want to, we would love to have you be involved with us as far as helping us map this out. We think we've got a pretty good road right now, but we're always going to hit a detour, so we've got to have that. But that's kind of our response, how we're going to react at this point in time. I know that was just kind of glossing over a lot of things. It gets into a lot more in-depth stuff, issues of how to deal with sick animals. You know, what if I have a maripola and I need to move her to the veterinary clinic, and you got to stop moving her? How do we deal with that? So there are issues that we've got to talk through and how we're going to do that. You know, I got some folks out there telling me that, no, she doesn't go nowhere. You know, that's a small piece of the pie. But we know that that's people's operations as well. So we've got to figure out how we're going to respond to that. So we are having a conversation.